Magneto is easily one of the most interesting villains in comic book history. I mean, he's basically in a league of his own alongside the likes of Doctor Doom and the Green Goblin. However, as far as the X-Men are concerned, both as a team and as an intellectual property, he stands almost uncontested. Few, if any, opponents that the mutants have ever faced have the same level of notoriety that he does. The closest ones I could think of would be Apocalypse, Stryker, the Shadow King, and maybe Arcade, depending on who exactly you ask. And that has never been more clear than in the X-Men film franchise. Other villains appear for sure, such as the Phoenix Force, Bolivar Trask, and the Sentinels, and even Sebastian Shaw. However, across each installment in the series of films, regardless of his involvement, whether it be that he's been manipulating the situation or that he's pivotal in some other way, the character who has unequivocally had the most impact has been the man himself. Eric Lehnsherr, Magneto, the master of magnetism. Now, as you can probably already tell, this video was themed after something very specific. This is my entry for Nando V Movie's One Excellent Scene project, similar to his One Marvelous Scene from last year, in which I also participated. I just had to make my return. I couldn't leave you guys wanting. And after much consideration, I decided that High Top Films, a creator that I have a lot of respect for, was onto something with his decision to cover the initial birth of Magneto as an identity that went far beyond Eric at the end of X-Men First Class, a strangely canonical prequel to the original X-Men films from the early 2000s. And as such, I wanted to cover something else related to the character. However, it's somewhat difficult to pull anything from this modern era of X-Men films, as they're widely accepted as pretty bad. However, one element therein has always been good without fail, and that is, of course, Magneto's character journey. Much as he was born in X-Men First Class, it could easily be said that he, as well as the original continuity, died in X-Men Days of Future Past. But that would not be the end of his story. This brings us to possibly the X-Men film with the least to offer, X-Men Apocalypse. Roughly a decade after the events of Days of Future Past, Magneto, as the world knows him, is essentially a wanted terrorist after threatening the president's life. Since then, he's moved back to Poland and started a family under the name Heinrich and is raising a daughter. He's also working a simple job at a steel factory when things take a turn for the worst. One of his co-workers is almost killed in an accident, and Eric uses his abilities to save his life and goes back to work as usual. However, he knows that his quiet, peaceful life is now over. As it turned out, someone blew the whistle and the Polish authorities come to arrest him, which scares his daughter into awakening her mutation, which seems to be some sort of animal telepathy. It's actually quite hard to tell. However, there are a few officers with bows and arrows, since metal equipment would be useless on Eric. And in the midst of the chaos, one of them releases an arrow, and it kills Eric's daughter and his wife, who was embracing her. In this moment, Eric Lehnsherr was no more, as the ideas and mentality he had toward non-mutants for all these years, the very perspective on the world that Charles Xavier had tried so hard to get him to see beyond, has been right all along. Eric now not only has total vindication for his hatred towards humankind, but has no reason to ever consider them as anything other than hateful, fear-mongering monsters who seek to eliminate what they don't understand. In anger, he uses his daughter's locket to kill every single officer involved. Now, I'm going to do something, but you have to promise not to get mad at me, okay? I'm now going to include a second scene in this analysis. Is that alright, Matt? I sure hope so. Eric's reformation back into Magneto is split across that scene and a subsequent one. In between, however, Eric returns to work, not even concerned with which of his so-called peers reported him. He's set on killing each and every one of them regardless. I mean, at this point, humans are all the same, and none of them are worth the space that they take up. In this moment, he meets the central antagonist of the film, Apocalypse, as he is in the midst of assembling his 4 horsemen. At this point, he's already recruited Storm, Psylocke, and Angel. Eric is all that remains. In my personal opinion, Eric was non-negotiable for Apocalypse. No matter what happens, he had to be secured. Not only was he one of the most powerful mutants, possibly the most powerful mutant up until Apocalypse was awakened, but he was one that was totally unafraid of himself and what he was. In order to convert him, Apocalypse takes him to the place where his journey originally began, Auschwitz. It is there that Eric gets back in touch with his true identity, and as Apocalypse promises him power beyond his previous limits, he begins to command the metal within the very earth itself, which is kind of amazing. This sequence is bone-chilling. The direction, the writing, the score, the effects all come together in a beautiful way as Eric is both humbled and driven by his new power and completely gives himself over to Apocalypse and his goal to tear down the non-mutant establishment and rebuild the world. After all, why wouldn't he? That is what Eric has wanted since the beginning. He believes that mutants are the superior species, the children of the atom, perhaps even God's chosen few. And for all these years, he's envisioned nothing more than a world where mutants and their very being towers above all, and they rule the world. Apocalypse is now a means to that end, and honestly, Magneto should have stayed this way for at least the rest of this film, maybe to be redeemed at some point during Dark Phoenix. This entire arc surrounding Magneto, though, was honestly the only bright spot in this film, if you ask me my true thoughts. At least it was as bright as it was, giving us one excellent scene. Or two, maybe. Big thanks to Matt from Nando V Movies for doing this again. Also thanks to High Top, Brown Table, Nerd Sync, and everyone else involved for having me yet again. I hope to see what you all came up with. And if this is your first video from me and you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing, because I do this every so often. And maybe if you're, have already been here for a while, consider supporting the Patreon. It'll go a long way. But that's all I got for you guys this time. I'll see you later.